Call this meeting to order, Oconee County Real Estate Facilities and Land Management meetings, August 18th, 2020, just after 4:30. We'll begin with approval of the September 3rd, 2019 meeting minutes. Have a motion to approve.
Make a motion.
A motion by Mr. Hart, second by Mr. Kane. Any changes, amendments? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Oconee County Energy Efficiencies presentation.
I'll do the introductions, as you all know, and it's reflected in the minutes from last year. This was a council initiative from 2 years ago where we were looking at the efficiencies and energy consumptions and wastes for Oconee County facilities. We have since then met with several entities and agencies that have offered to provide services and narrowed it down to one, based on one, their experience, two, the scope of work they do, and three, the captured savings that would be reflected upon your approval with the upgrades. And therefore, I'm going to introduce Mr. Mike Wilson here, Johnston Controls.
So I'm not going to touch the podium, I promise you.
You can still use it, you just can't touch it.
It's good to be here. I have a lot of experience in Oconee County. I live across the border in Anderson County and Powdersville, but I spent almost 8 years working with Duke Energy in Oconee County and represented our company as the district manager and government relations, community relations, worked with county council quite a bit, a few administrators. So I actually have been in this position before, but talking about taxes and things of that nature at the Coney Nuclear Station. But it's great to be back. I work with Johnston Controls now and have been with Johnston Controls a couple of years. Had a stop at higher education with Forma University in between there. We've been talking with Amanda for 8 or 9 months and the staff here about how we can improve efficiency in county buildings. Before we jump into that process, I want to give you a little bit of background about Johnston Controls. Some of you may know that we had a facility here, an asset in Oconee County that made batteries, and we have sold that part of our company, and we focus exclusively on buildings right now. So building efficiency, sustainability, security, resilience of buildings, and utility assets is where our core competency is. We made batteries and car parts for years. Those were very profitable divisions for us. We sold those and now have used that money to move into the security and the fire business. So we have vertical markets of security, fire, building controls, HVAC. So that's our core competency, pretty much what you see in a building. But Johnston Controls has been around since 1885. Warren Johnson started the company. The reason I tell you that, because I think it's a pretty interesting story. He was teaching a class, and he had tapped on the pipe to tell the gentleman in the boiler to put more coal in the boiler. He says, there's got to be a better way. So he invented the thermostat. So since then, he patented the thermostat, and now it's a $36 billion company. We're in 120 countries, and we have over 100,000 people that work for us. We have 160 that work in South Carolina. We're in 3 offices, Greenville, Columbia, and Charleston. We've been here since 1905. And what we're going to talk about today is a process we call performance contracting. And we pretty much invented that industry and have done over 3,000 performance contracts alone in the United States. So we've been doing this since 1983. So we are the pilgrims in that regard. So I'm going to go through a few slides here. That's enough about Johnston Controls and Mike Wilson. We'll go to the next one.
I'm gonna let you use this.
Right.
Point it in this direction. Or just do a circle.
Okay, so we're on.
Try it again.
Am I going the wrong direction? All right. Up.
To the right. Let me hold it. I'll click it for you.
There we go.
There you go.
Okay. That's the agenda. We're going to give you a little bit of overview of the project, what our goals are. We're going to go into the finances of it, and then what's the path forward. We're going to try to do this in about the next 10 minutes, so it shouldn't take too long.
No? Okay. I'll
Just write it for me.
Okay, let's do this, let's start it.
We've had technical difficulties in
Now
chambers.
try it. See if
It's
it'll
not
work
you,
for
Mike.
No? Okay, well, here, I'll just do it.
Okay. Well, our goal is how can we upgrade facilities across the building fleet of Oconee County and do it in a neutral format that doesn't involve raising taxes or any other situation like that? How can we find a way to do this that's somewhat neutral? We're looking at the critical infrastructure of the buildings, building envelope, the HVAC, lighting and things of that nature, water facilities. And so all the county buildings, we have done a preliminary analysis. We've gone through about 12 or 13 buildings. And there's aging infrastructure, as most of you know. I mean, you guys are not alone. This is true of most school districts. It's true of county government. It's true of colleges. It's really tough to stay on top of the maintenance that's needed in a public facility. Things age, it's hard to find the money to do it. So we're going to show you a way we believe we can finance this and get this done pretty expeditiously. And one of the other things too is comfort. How do we address comfort and security? Better lighting leads to better security, comfort of employees, and also reduce the deferred maintenance. So that's a cost we can capture. So, okay, you go to the next one. This is just a example of a unit. We know this is a old school building and some inefficiencies here in some of the equipment. And creates older equipment, creates, annual escalation of cost of operations, inefficiencies of the systems. Where do we find the funds to finance this or to pay for this when they stop working, sometimes all at one time? How do we, once again, I'm talking about the comfortable work environment. And then also there's the good stewardship of county tax dollars and also the environment. So this project has really two good things about it among many things, but the two I'd like to point out is we're able to do this without increasing taxes. And also it's a great way to provide a better environmental footprint for Oconee County. So next slide. These are some of the pictures we took back in the fall. You guys are familiar with some of these buildings, the administration building. If you zoom in, you saw the unit there that was in the previous slide. Lighting at the Brown building, the courthouse, some of the piping there on top of the roof of the law enforcement center, and maintenance building, among others. These are just some of the pictures we took of some of the things that have some age and some inefficiencies to it that we feel like this project will fund, and we'll be able to bring a better infrastructure system to Oconee County. Next slide. Thank you. What we're going to do is talk about a little bit about how we do this. The arrow we pull out of our quiver is called performance contracting in this situation. So we look at your current maintenance and repair, your emergency replacements, utility bills, gas, water, electric, your capital outlay, your overtime and labor costs, and manual processes. All that's, you currently have all of those right now. So if you'll just look at that big blue rectangle on the left called current, and then let's move over to the right. We have squished that down and squeezed it tighter, so those costs are going to be lower. And you're going to gain some efficiencies and savings at the top in the green, and the capital that you're going to use to do this is going to be paid for by the savings. So you basically got a cash flow system where you take money out of one column, move it to another. The taxpayer in the county still remains whole. You get brand new equipment. So it's the technical definition of what we do, and I'm going to read it. It uses guaranteed energy savings, operational savings, and avoided capital expenditures to fund repayment of capital for building infrastructure needs, resulting in a net positive impact to Oconee County. Two words there I want to highlight is guaranteed. If these savings do not come to fruition, we stand behind it and we will cut you a check at the end of the year to make up for the savings you did not get, we said you're going to get. So the risk of performance goes on Johnson Controls' shoulders. So we take all the risk, and it's a net positive impact to the county. That's very important as well. Next slide. These are some of the facility improvement measures. You know, every company has acronyms, little short abbreviations we use. In our company, we actually call facility improvement measures, but they're energy conservation measures, some people call them. But how are we going to improve the facility? So some of the things that jumped out at us are existing lighting, moving to LED. I know Amanda and team has done some of this in this building. We sit in already with some grants, but there's huge opportunity at the rest of the fleet. Plumbing could probably be upgraded to use less water, and there are also some opportunities probably to go into the no-touch type situations. I would be amiss if I didn't stop here and talk a little bit about COVID, and I hate to do it in the middle of this slide, but our company has been on the ground fighting COVID since Wuhan. We have employees in China. We got called by the Chinese government to help set up temporary hospitals. So our people in 6 days moved to set up temporary hospitals in Wuhan. We brought that expertise and how to do that quickly. We've done that in New York. We've done that in Minnesota, Detroit, and fortunately, we haven't had to use a lot of those facilities that we set up temporarily, whether it's a convention center or wherever it may be, or the parking lot of a hospital with temporary tents. But our technology is in probably 75% of hospitals in America. So it gave us a unique expertise into how to set up these systems. And also the things we do with HVAC to fight COVID, things we do with ultraviolet light to fight COVID, and some of the high-tech cameras we're using in buildings to identify people as they walk into a building. Not a real commercial about that, but I think it brings a lot of credibility to who we are and what we do. But I'm going to jump back up here, replacing HVAC. We saw some units that need to be, I think you don't have to even be an HVAC specialist to understand that the county has some aging HVAC equipment. The control systems, that's where there's a real opportunity to get all the building fleet on one control system so we can make these systems operate in unison and with efficiency. And also, one of the big things right now with COVID fighting is to bring in outside air into your buildings. So humidity rates between 40 and 60% is where COVID really struggles to survive. So you do that with a control system to bring in the right outdoor air mixture. Won't get into that. Jason can cover that more if he wants to, but the point is you have to have the sophistication in systems and controls to make these buildings safer from an outdoor air and humidity point of view. We're going to possibly look at, if you want to, explore some alternative energy options. If we can discuss anything, but we just put that out there. Some people are interested in that today. And also the building envelope. And a lot of this, as we're doing this, we'll be working as a team with your staff. This will not be something we go off and do in isolation. We'll have committee meetings and progress meetings, and we'll bring, after we do our first forensic study of the county, we'll come back and make those presentations to you, and you guys will be able to choose on exactly what you want to do. So this is not something we do in a vacuum. It's very much a team approach. Next slide. So kind of what funds this, the sources that drive the cash flow are LED lighting, water conservation, plug load controls, building envelope, and controls. What that can pay for, which often are very expensive pieces of equipment or HVAC equipment, R22 equipment replacement, and a few other things we won't get into, but those are the money drivers, and a lot of people use that to pay down the cost of the big HVAC tickets. So let's go to the next slide. This is probably a wider slide than you can see, but I think you have a deck in front of you. It's just a column row explanation of sort of what we're seeing initially. Now, the next phase of this is to get your approval to go in and do a more complete in-depth forensic engineering study of your county fleet and come back to you and say, exactly, this is what we're finding. This is what it will yield and for savings. But our early assessment is, LED lighting, and you can see the X's across the buildings there from the County Sheriff's Office all the way to the library. I won't read through all that, but you can see there's a lot of lighting opportunities, a lot of water conservation opportunities, some building controls, probably at 3/4 of your buildings, and HVAC equipment at most all but one. There's probably an opportunity for that as well. So, but that will change as we get into this more deeply and have our team go through these buildings. Hate to use the word forensic, that sometimes brings a bad connotation, but I also think it brings a level of sophistication and a level of detail that I think we want to stress on what we're going to be doing in this next phase. Next slide, please, Katie. This is kind of how this works in numbers. So this is a pro forma cash flow, how this can work. Based on the utility bills that we've looked at, buildings we think we can affect, we're modeling right now about a $1.3 million project. That could go up $500,000, it could go down a couple. I don't think it's gonna go down a whole lot. We're very conservative on this. We're looking at this model here, which is 12-year term at a 4% rate. I'm not a banker, but I promise you this. What's your bond rating, Amanda?
AA plus.
AA plus. That's, Justin, what do you think? That's, we're not here to make a commitment on bond rate, but a rate of money, but it's gonna be less than 4%. We're assuming in this model that you're gonna save about 23% on average, conservatively, electricity, natural gas, and water. And if we were to take this model here and go through, let's start at year one and go from left to right. Utility savings year one's about $73,500. That's going to grant you, with you putting in new equipment, and you're going to have operational and avoided cost savings there. That total savings is about $145,000. The loan payment is $124,500. And there's ongoing services we do to monitor this, to bring our expertise on a regular basis. That's optional, but we put it in there. You're net positive at $1. So most every client we do, they says, let's do as much work as we can do. We don't want to have this where it's $100,000 savings the first year. We want to do as much work as we can. So let's make this engine work for us. Year two is very similar with some escalation rates built in. Remember, it's a model. Then I just put down year 12. I left out year 3 through 11. But I think what we want to look at totally, utility savings in the next 12 years in a very conservative model is about $1 million. And there's some operational savings, some capital cost avoidance. That totals almost about $2 million in savings. Your loan payment's $169. There's ongoing services. Like I said, we have clients, Justin, that sometimes go through that the whole term. Sometimes they start a couple years and they back off. So that depends on, I just put it in there for an example. So this, as I have had a utility manager tell me at a college in South Carolina, he says, Mike, I want to do this because I'm not getting any money from the state of South Carolina. My buildings are getting older, and I don't want to pay Duke Power, and I don't want to pay Spartanburg Water any more than I have to. So I'd rather put my money into brand new equipment. So I don't have to have my maintenance team running all over campus and spending, they could be doing other things. So in a nutshell, that's really what we do. We monetize the energy savings and use that to leverage new equipment to upgrade the county fleet of buildings. So next slide.
Could we stop right there?
Yeah, go.
I don't
I'm sorry,
have that.
Mr. Kane. I should
No,
have let
you're
you-
fine.
Yeah.
I don't have that slide in my packet, and unless I'm just missing.
You have it, it's just so small
Okay, I
that you
couldn't
can't
figure out
see
which
it.
page it was on.
I'll be glad to, Amanda and team has this deck here. She'll be glad to get it to you. It's,
don't have
it's a one,
I'm
it's,
just looking at it on there.
Yeah, I was looking at it on here. Loan payment, it says the total's $169, but
That's a typo.
Okay.
That's a typo, it's missing the zero.
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay.
It's transitioning it from Excel to PowerPoint, we just
Okay.
left that zero on.
Gotcha.
bad.
Better
Yeah.
without the zero.
I don't believe that slide is in these packages.
Yeah, that's Mike's Excel skills coming. Thank you.
Oh.
Good catch, though.
No, well, so our savings at the end of the 12 years is $11.25 net.
I would answer it this way, so the state statute requires.
Step forward just a little bit
Oh, I'm sorry.
underneath,
Yes, sir,
there you go,
no problem.
because it'll get you.
Good afternoon, glad to be here, my name is Justin
I
Newbern.
apologize for interrupting
Yeah.
the
No, go ahead.
presentation.
No, it's great. Justin Newbern, I'm with Johnson Controls. I'm a licensed professional engineer and I'm our area sales manager for the southeastern United States. So to answer your question, the state statute requires that each year that the savings have to be at least $1 more than what the loan payment plus the ongoing services is. So as an example, what we did was we simplified the model to make it $1 more in benefits than it is for the loan payment. So some clients say, I want $50,000 above the loan payment every year because they want to redirect those dollars into some other initiative that Johnson Controls may or may not be a part of. And so for this example, the 1125 is just a sample model for these 3 years. But what you'll see at the end of our detailed development, which is what Mike was alluding to, each year you will have a cost and a benefit throughout the term. And so the state statute allows for up to 20 years in the state of South Carolina. We're looking at between a 10 and 12-year term for this project at this stage. But at the end of the day, it's up to the county to determine which term is best fit for them, which projects are best fit for them. And then, of course, it's our obligation to make sure that they pay for themselves during that period of time. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I apologize again.
No problem.
So, what do we have left? It's getting close to the end there, isn't it?
You're on slide 12.
Okay.
That's what this one is.
Yeah, let's move to the next one and, so what's this process look like? We're looking at this stage based on our early walkthroughs and our early calculations, we feel like there's a project here between $1 and $2 million of upgrades we could do that the utility operational savings will pay for. So let's verify that. So how are we gonna verify that? We're gonna have to put some professionals on the ground here, do some work, and do this project. It's called a project development agreement we would sign. So that's what we're asking at this level to do. We do this detailed audit, step 2. We come back to you with a laundry list of things that we could do at the county, and we would work as a team to try to figure out what makes sense and what we should do and maybe shouldn't do. And we select the final scope of the project, and then we move into we look at the actual next to last blue box down there, final cost and savings scope. So we finalize the cost of the project, finalize the savings of the project. And then when we sign this contract, that's what we're guaranteeing. We put our seal of approval on it, we guarantee it. If we miss the mark by some reason, we take accountability, we take the risk, and we make you whole at the end of the year. So, next slide. This is just some similar terminology and a little bit different look, but we're looking to, at this stage, $60,000 engineering assessment to go into this detailed forensic step that we would do. If you sign at the end of this, you say, yes, we like this, we want to go forward, that would be rolled into the cost of the project. So we're looking about November to come back to you after we do this detailed assessment. And then sometime in the December timeframe, we finalize everything based on what we want to do and what buildings we want to include with certain facility improvement measures. And then we start work late this year. Maybe it's a great opportunity during the holidays to get in here while there's not a lot of people here for safety reasons to start some of this work and then have it completed in the summer of 2021. So during that time, there would be no outlay of money from anybody, even from the loan, that would not start until we finalize all the work. So we're bearing the cost until the final work is signed off on and implemented. I think that's the last slide. But it's been a joy working with Amanda and team. We do this all over the country. We enjoy this kind of work. I often get asked the question, being a utility executive, Mike, what do you do with Johnson Controls? And please don't take this the wrong way, because I know how much money Duke Energy pays Coney County. And I'm still a stockholder of Duke Energy. But I encourage customers to use less utility product than they have to, than the taxpayer has to. And they take those savings and they leverage it to get new equipment. And that new equipment brings comfort, it brings sustainability for the environment, and also brings a level of safety. So with better humidity situations, better control systems, we're learning more and more every day about indoor air quality and how important that is to fighting COVID. And also with better lighting, there's also trips, slips, and falls. Don't want to paint that picture, but there's certainly those components are very important to any public building today. So we stand ready to take any question you have about this, but we're simply asking to go to the next phase.
Thank y'all for being here to present. Energy consumption is encouraged by those that even produce energy, so.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the things that we're going through, and any way to lower that. A lot of the things that we're trying to do, we have to do anyway.
Right.
And some of the things that you bring up are already ready to be replaced, as we talked about with the recirculation of air, the amount of humidity that's coming in on our
Right.
units versus some of the new units don't put a little drier air, which is a safer air.
Right.
And it's honestly better for the employees themselves. So a lot of the stuff that you bring up, and I've looked at, the city of Charleston and the project that y'all are doing there. So I saw that you did mention that in the slide, just to try to see what they're doing and what their savings are. Now, I think, y'all are still doing stuff there,
Right,
but that's
yeah.
been ongoing for a couple of years.
Yeah,
But
we've done a couple phases with the city of Charleston.
And it
And what-
seems to be pretty an amazing return for what I guess, I don't know how many years that's,
You know, the term of that, we're going into the second phase of City of Charleston, if I'm not mistaken, but I
Yep.
think I don't remember, is it a 15-year term?
Yes, sir. So this is our third phase with this, Charleston. We've had approximately a 50-year relationship with the city of Charleston. And so we finished the first two phases. And so the lights that we replaced in the first phase we're replacing again as part of the third phase. So it's been, that was about a $12.5 or $13 million initiative on this latest phase, which we're wrapping up implementation on now. And so we've overdriven on those savings, and I think that's a testament to the relationship we have with that client, that they've come back to us to do additional phases. So, our team has been very successful, and Charleston's one of our most marquee projects in the state of South Carolina.
that's from what my understanding was, is what y'all proposed versus what they received. Y'all underestimated it, and I mean, their return was there, so they were very appreciative of, the presentation and very conservative efforts to saying, hey, this is what we're guaranteeing. But the return on it seemed to be much better, so, and I think that's based on what I can tell, they implemented the second or third phase quicker than what was proposed because of the savings, so, and honestly, it seems to be, it's savings, which is what we're after here. The lightings and the HVAC units, all that stuff has to be replaced, period. But doing it this way is actually not only very, very affordable, but it's actually tax savings to what we're trying to implement. So, great program. I mean, it's kind of one of those things.
Good summary, Mr. Davis, to be honest with you. That was very good.
It's a win-win for everybody. It's something that we have to do and continue to work forward to. And if you look at utilization when, our courthouse, look at what we spent trying to fix that issue. Well, it was $645,000 HVAC.
Which is why it wasn't checked off on the box.
Which is why, and so it was one of those things that,
Yes, sir.
when we go about new buildings, we got a new building set up on the wall, making sure that it's headed in the right direction, which I'm sure it is. but this is one of those things that having expertise for what y'all are providing, you know, being able to stay in these older buildings is expensive, but stuff like this can make it very affordable.
That's well said. Thank you for that summary. I wish I could, this is gonna be on YouTube, right?
It is. You're a star.
That's good. One of the things we've moved into recently as a result of COVID is flexible buildings and making sure they have the ability to move quickly into multiple uses, whether it's for, we look at airborne pathogens and other needs, ice storms and hurricanes and tornadoes. How do we make a building able to use it, different parts of it for different things real quickly? So I think in the future, as we look to design new buildings, those kind of architectural mindsets, working with companies like Johnson Controls will be critical to see how do we make this building able to handle multiple things in a matter of a day. So that's just a side story, but.
Any other?
Mr. Kane, you got a question?
Yeah, I was just gonna ask, it's like a 12-year term on that thing. How long does the equipment, or what's the depreciation on that kind of stuff? Is it expected to last 20 years, 30 years? Because we basically would pay off phase one after approximately, call it a 12, based on the model you've presented, 12-year term. And then from there, it's all, we see those savings, obviously, because we're not paying
Right.
juice on the note. So, is that the idea? Is
Yeah.
that we're gonna have, we'll have already
There'll
paid for the
be a period of
equipment?
time after the term that this equipment will, you know, still be viable and you will gain even more savings, you know?
Yeah.
But, that depends on what, we're talking about a control system, we're talking about an HVA system, or we're talking about a water faucet, you know, those are three different
Yeah.
terms of use on those things that, you know, that one may be 35, 40 years, one
Right.
may be 12 or
Yeah.
15,
Yeah.
you know.
I
so-
got you.
And we did recommend to look at the 10-year model.
Yeah.
So as we get into the analysis of the use and function, I mean, systematically, the HVAC system won't last beyond a 12-year period. You'll hit a depreciation place where it's just not as efficient when it hits a certain point. And there may be a phase two replacement schedule on those. But we wouldn't want to do a 20-year period because there's very little HVAC or other water sewer infrastructure that's gonna last 20 years without needing to be.
Well, and technology might change during that term as well, but.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, but
what
pipes
happens.
don't.
Ms. Brock,
Pipe is not a technology.
Well, the
asked us to
pipe,
look at a
right, sure.
10-year
Right.
term, and we
I just
certainly
mean
will do
large
that.
capital
And
cost.
The, you made a good point, technology. That's why we've been able to do multiple phases with clients like Charleston, because technology is constantly changing, and it brings efficiencies and economies of scale to the client. So we're able to go back in and put in new equipment and then and use the savings once again to pay for it. So it's a good way to use an interesting financing vehicle, a performance contract, which is in 49 of our 50 states has legislation on it. So it's been done quite a bit, and it alleviates the use of tax dollars. And also you have a company like us, a Fortune 100 company, who stands beside it, and you put the risk on us to perform, so.
So under the recommended next steps, a signed project development agreement. So I guess that would be, where does the cost start getting involved? Is this where the Johnson Controls to complete project development and provide firm cost November 2020? Or
We would have project development costs, our engineers and doing their work. And if we were to come to and get to that phase and decide, yes, we want to move forward with this, those costs are part of our overall project. And we continue the engineering scope of work, and then that more detailed forensic work becomes, when we finalize the cost at the end of that, when we put the equipment into the buildings at sometime next summer, that's when there's a actual payment that comes due. So you will be garnering the benefits of the equipment and the new control systems and the new lighting before the loan payment is due. Right, Justin?
Yes, yes, sir. So So the next step, as Mike mentioned, was the project development agreement. That's essentially an opportunity for us to mobilize our resources and a financial commitment on behalf of the county in the event that we develop a project that's self-funding, that fits the financial model that we've discussed, and you decide, hey, I changed my mind, I don't want to move forward with it, that's an opportunity for us to just get reimbursed for our cost. And that's really our cost. So in the event that you say, hey, we do want to move forward with the project, that's what Mike was alluding to, that rolls in. So this step is really an opportunity for us to formally have an agreement, for us to go out and get our design engineers on site to determine what airflows need to be, what light levels need to be, how many fixtures there are. That part of that guarantee is the pre-measurement of the existing equipment, how many watts it's pulling, how many gallons it uses, how many run hours a day. All those things are very granular things that we do as part of that process. And we're working right in hand with your staff to say how many occupancy you have, how many run hours, here's the wattages we measured, all those things. And we do it by space type, by building, by fixture type. It's very granular, and that's what the state process requires. And then at the end, we have a baseline for us to come back during that true-up period at the end of year 1, year 2, year 3, and so on, for us to say, here's what we said the savings would be, and here's what they are. Did we overachieve like we did, as the example that you discussed at Charleston, or do we need to reconcile those benefits? So that's the general process.
Can we make sure, I guess, that the project cash flow is spelled out 1 through 12 years?
Oh, yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
I'd like any other
We'll add that zero back in too.
I'd like to make a motion to refer this to full council September 1st? First.
You make a motion, or you?
That's what I'm
asking?
making.
First?
No, I'm making a motion.
Okay.
No, I'm sorry, September the first, I was
September,
First.
yeah, to refer this energy efficiency for Johnson Controls September 1st to full council.
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Very much. Very nice to meet you guys.
Seriously? I heard you. I'm threatening you.
Mike, did you leave a card? Did y'all leave one? I got,
Who'd I leave them with?
yep, you want his card just in case you need.
Not on the podium.
Gaines?
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
There's a page on that we don't have.
All right. Few discussion items, County Conservation Bank,
Okay,
you have 4.
Andrew Smith, Chair of the County Conservation Bank, bringing you some proposed amendment language to the ordinance that governs the bank. And you want me just to go right through it? Okay. So the first one you see in the draft before you is on page 2. Everything's underlined, the proposed changes. And the first one reiterates a policy the county already has and adds to it just a little bit, dealing with members who miss meetings. And so the board shall report to council any member who, without adequate excuse such as documented illness, misses 3 consecutive meetings or a majority of meetings for a year. So we added, or a majority of meetings for the year. Okay. And you want me just to wait for questions? If you have them, you just keep rolling, okay? So page 3, we're in section 2-402. The bottom, you see the underline in that paragraph, the OCCB funds shall be used only for the purposes set forth herein. Funds donated to the OCCB by third parties shall not be redirected by council. And we actually, a couple of us met with a potential donor who could be potentially a major donor to the fund. And that was their first question, is who controls this? And they were actually a little bit disconcerted that the decision ultimately was made by council. And, that was just their fear. They don't know, this may be a great council, the next one may be not, or whatever. And they were concerned that I can donate $35,000 and it may be shunted to something else. And this, we thought, would help that situation not to chill potential major donors to it. And so that's that one right there. Page 4, we have criteria that we use. I added a little language to dealing with that. Number 5, extent of active farming on the property and extent proposed to be kept as wooded land or farmland. Number 7, scenic view from property or preservation of general scenic nature of that part of the county. And number 12, potential impact on water quality and wetlands or water bodies not on the property. That one really came up when we were looking at the Whetstone property up there off of Rocky Gap Road. Got a beautiful Whetstone Creek through it that flows to the Chattooga. And so that was one of the things we thought about, was that we might want to think about how a positive or negative effect on the proposed property might affect water quality off the property itself. That's why we added that in. Bottom of the page. So an eligible recipient has to give notice to the landowners that this process is going on, that this landowner is thinking about putting a conservation easement on it. They give them notice, and we also wanted that adjacent landowner to be able to know that they could comment. So we added, within 30 days, they can submit comments to the board.
Do we do any signage? I know with BZA, things like that, but we don't do any signage or anything. Do you see a need for that on the proposed
Signage?
property?
I don't.
I know that y'all are trying to notify the other landowners, but I don't see a need because it's that specific landowner selecting his land for this.
This is private conservation.
Right.
That's correct. We don't see a need for that.
So if a proposed adjacent landowner rejected this, it's just, is that why you're,
Well, the requirement's already in there to give that notice, and we didn't create that provision in there, and I'm sure there's negative situations where it could come up, but I almost seem like positive situations might be better, that somebody comes in and says, please give them this money, this is a great idea, but, you know.
just notification that that land's in the conservation bank?
And we were just changing, just so that the eligible recipient in giving that notice tells them, you can make comments to the council. They're not told that, you know, and why else would you notify them unless you?
And these are public meetings, public documents, so everything is, so.
That's correct.
How
And move,
How often do you meet?
sir,
How often do you meet and what days?
our council, we meet at least, we're required to meet 3 times a year, but we meet 7 approximately.
What day?
Mr. Hart, I can-
Tuesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, what day
We
do
meet
you?
on council days, Tuesdays.
Okay.
And it's not a particular second or third, it really is based on, we have 3 application cycles, and we have to have 2 meetings within that 60-day cycle. And so we have to meeting to gather all the applications, look at them, review them, and then a second meeting to make our decision. So it just depends on, you know, what Tuesday after April 1st or August 1st works well for the meeting. So it's not like the second or the third or the first Tuesday, you know, it's something like that.
Y'all been in the morning, y'all had some in the afternoon, so y'all try to
We
adjust.
usually meet at 9 o'clock on Tuesday mornings when we meet. We met this morning. Okay. That's a good question for whoever you're thinking about for.
Well, the reason, I had one man that jumped off of the bank because he had a conflict on Tuesday mornings.
What?
He was in in Anderson County with some bank down there that had the meeting the same time, and he dropped off of the Oconee County.
I see. So you can't make it work for everybody.
Well, I understand.
Yeah. Who knows what's the best time? Since I've been on, which is almost 2 years now, I don't believe we've missed a meeting because of a lack of a quorum. So we've always had one. Right now, we got 5 members and we're still making meetings. Page 5, we're looking at sub 6. Board shall require an eligible OCCB recipient acquiring fee title of land to place a conservation easement on such property or included language in the deed to ensure that the property is permanently protected. And that's what we added, that it's gonna be in the deed. It's easy with the conservation easement because that's all about protecting the land. But if you do a fee simple transfer, there was no requirement that it be in the deed, so we added that. And we did that recently, and the language that we gave was subject to, you do the property description, et cetera, in the deed, subject to these easements, et cetera, subject to the provisions of sections 2-398 through 2-409 of the Coney County Code of Ordinance, such that the premises shall be permanently protected, is an example of that kind of language that we can use. Number 8, we added this entire provision. The board shall establish reasonable procedures and requirements to ensure that the personal information of eligible recipients and property owners is protected as permitted by the Freedom of Information Act. So, these are public applications, but we want to be able to redact their social security numbers, their driver's license numbers, et cetera, financial information as well. Application review, now this one is, we'll go to 3 first. The board shall evaluate each application, submit recommendations to council within, it used to be 60 days, we moved it to 90. We found in the practical application, making those 2 meetings within that 60 days after the grant deadline can be difficult. So we just changed that to 90 days. 4, in recommending the award of the grant from the fund, the board shall set forth findings that indicate the items below. That was already there. The board may delegate to one of its members this duty to write a report summarizing the board's findings and delivering it to council. There's just some little typos in there and that we'll clean up. The point is that we have the duty to evaluate it per the criteria and then report to you. And we wanted to put that in there, that we're gonna write a report and then somebody will deliver it to you guys. Yep, that's all I want to say there. Page 6. Okay, so this one, sub 6 there, the second line where it says within 12 months, we changed that to 12 months from 3 months. We found that the practical application was that by the time the application got to us, we went through our process, council went through its process, their appraisal may be out of date. And the standard in the industry is appraisal is good for 12 months. So we moved to that 12 months instead of the 3. Because as you know, that's not an inexpensive process to get an appraisal. It just has to be within that. We also found too, that it might be a good idea to do the next part, which is we may accept a market analysis update covering the time period from the date of the original appraisal to the present in the form of a letter prepared and signed by the original appraiser. Said market analysis update letter must be submitted to the board no later than 30 days prior to the next scheduled board meeting. We did that because appraisers can't update appraisals. They have to do a new appraisal. And from talking to appraisers, this is the closest we could get to updating an appraisal without requiring it. It may cost $200 instead of $700. But we don't have to accept that. We've got the discretion to choose when it's appropriate. Yes, sir.
What is the percentage of the bank toward the appraisal? Like if the land is $100,000, what is that percentage of the Conservation Bank Board gives toward that value of the land?
So what we look at, if it's a fee simple purchase, the entire purchase price is the conservation value. If it's a conservation easement purchase, there's going to be a reduction in value because you're stripping away development rights. Our policy is we give grants of no more than 10% of that conservation value. And we came up with that figure in talking to the executive director of the South Carolina Conservation Bank. I think they have nailed down their grant limit as 30%. And we were just knocking back and forth how we do that, and that's the suggestion we came up with. They liked that suggestion. They thought it was a good suggestion for us. I mean, we give out an $88,000 grant for 880 $880,000 project to conserve 240 acres, we're still putting out just a little bit of money to get a lot of conservation value, because we only will pay 10% of that conservation value. It's still a lot of money, and it hurts every time it goes out, because that's a big chunk. of
Well,
what we
it's a
have.
fantastic program. It's not tax dollars.
Right.
This is money that's donated or.
It's gonna be supported from donations from people like yourself. Will
I
help
think
us
the
keep
other
this
thing
going.
is, I just wanted to get clarification, because it's not, when we're talking about appraisals, it's not 100% of the appraisal price anyway, regardless of what that is. It's a percentage based on whatever that style
Conservation value
of
is.
conservation value is.
That's right. And really, at the time of the application, all we have to go on is the appraisal. And that's the only thing we can base that determination on. Going on down on page 6 into the grant awards. This is very common. The South Carolina Conservation Bank does it. You have a grant agreement. That's what we're requiring of ourselves and our recipients, to have a grant agreement with us. So within 14 days of their acceptance of the grant award, the eligible OCCB recipient shall execute or record a grant agreement or memorandum thereof, which shall be in the form approved by the board. We've got a committee now that's gonna draft our grant agreement. Said agreement shall include provisions for the indemnification and reimbursement of the OCCB for improperly used OCCB funds or title issues or defects, perpetual monitoring and enforcement, and other actions pursuant to section 2-405. I'm gonna come back to one of the principles in that when I get down just a little bit further. So they also have to submit documents to us prior to closing. And the board and the county attorney or an attorney designated by the county administrator on recommendation by the board shall review those documents. Now, the requirement was we're gonna review that stuff. There was no direction on who reviews it. And so the first person we thought of that needs to review it is the county attorney. I mean, I'm an attorney, I can review these documents, I do real estate closings and real estate work all the time, but you may not have a real estate attorney on the board. There needs to be somebody in the county that does that, so it's the county attorney or an attorney that we designate to do that. The practical application now is David and I review those together and suggest our edits and changes to the recipient before closing. So they have to submit that certified appraisal. They have to submit the draft of the conservation easement or deed, settlement statement draft, title insurance commitment exceptions draft, and the grant agreements. Now, what used to be in here was a provision that said that in the title insurance policy, the county's gonna be a named insured in that. And it doesn't work that way. The county's not actually a party to the title insurance. The title insurance is between the title insurance company and the landowner. So they can't make an additional insured in there. It just doesn't work. It doesn't operate like that. But the point is that the county was trying to make is that if something's bad in the title, we want to get our money back. We want that title insurance pay and get our money back. So we've dealt with that a little further on in the ordinance, saying that if there are title defects, or the title is not good, that they have to reimburse the fund for that. I've gotta lick my fingers here. So I'm just gonna skip over just to show you that provision since we're talking about it. If you'll go to page 8, about middle of the page, a little below, this is 2-405I. In the event that the title to the protected property interest is invalidated or otherwise found to be deficient, the board shall be reimbursed by the eligible OCCB recipient and/or owner in an amount up to the amount of the award approved by county council and dispersed to the eligible OCCB recipient. So, I mean, the practical way that happens, so a title, something comes up in the title, somebody attacks the title 2 years down the road. And boom, it's found out they don't have title for this, all bets are off, it's changed in hands, whatever. That's what title insurance does. They step in your shoes and they pay out that title insurance premium, or not premium, but policy to you. That person who gets that money has to give our portion back to us. It's a requirement of the law if this is put in there. So we were just dealing with that desire that couldn't work the way we had it in there. So we made it so it could work. Page 7, sub 6. You know, before there's no requirements for them to communicate with us after everything happened. So I want to see all those closing documents after they're signed. So no later than 60 days after the day of closing, the OCCB grant recipient shall submit a report to the board describing how the grant funds were distributed or used and the status of the project. The report shall include supporting documentation such as the closing settlement statement, disbursement statement, and the recorded conservation easement or deed. Next, in 2-405 under C, closing cost. Trying to think of what we changed in that. Nothing in that first sentence, but what we allowed is the board shall have the discretion to allow the funds to be used solely for closing cost after considering the amount of the award, the value of the project, the amount of the closing costs, or other factors. In the event that the OCCB determines that the funds were spent for purposes other than those listed in this subsection or grant agreement, the eligible OCCB recipient or property owner shall reimburse the OCCB in the amount of the improperly used funds plus interest. And what we really wanted to do there is we wanted to, it wasn't really clear before that you can use this entirely for closing cost, if that's appropriate, you know. So that was the main clarification. And we wanted that sentence in there again about them having to reimburse for us if the funds were improperly used. And that reporting from the prior section that I was talking about will tell us that. D, in this same subsection, in the event there's a mortgage on the property, the recipient and property owner, if any, shall notify and inform the mortgagee or debt holder that the mortgage will be subordinate to the conservation easement or conservation provisions in the deed. The eligible recipient shall copy the OCCB on the notice and information to the mortgagee. Conservation easements are routinely make prior mortgages subordinate to them. In other words, the conservation easement will survive a foreclosure on the property if somebody defaults under a mortgage or if it's sold or whatever. And we just want them to know that this is happening. We want to require it to make sure that that box is checked off, that they've given notice to that mortgage holder that this is going to happen, that it's going to be subordinate. So if they got a problem with that, they'll tell us early on in the process, and you know, perhaps it won't go through. Continuing on, now we're in E. So this provision basically was already in there, and this is a scenario where a easement or the protections that have been put on it have somehow been extinguished or changed. Maybe through condemnation, you can understand that, but I'm not sure I understand it other ways that it would be. So there was already a provision of making payment of the original fair market value as determined by a certified appraiser. It just said making a cash payment. It didn't say who the cash payment was to. And we thought, well, there's only a couple of places it could go, to the OCCB or to buying replacement property. So we put the provision in there, making payment in cash to the OCCB fund of whichever is higher of the original fair market value or the current fair market value, as determined by an appraiser or appraisal paid for by the owner of the property. So, they could say, okay, we'll give you $25,000, but the appraisal says it's worth $35,000. We were before locked into that 25, but we want to go with the market on that, if that's what happens, because this is, to us, a significant change to the property. And as we all know, we don't want conservation easements. I mean, we want them to go in perpetuity. We don't want them to be extinguished. And so the provision in E deals with a fee simple purchase. The provision in F deals with the same provision in conservation easements. The last changes that we have are on page 8. H, the eligible recipient or property owner shall notify the board in the event that a claim against title to the property has been made. We want to know about it. I already read it. If the title is found to be defective or deficient, they're paying the money back from their title insurance policy. And J, in the event that there's no conservation easement on a property funded by the OCCB, in other words, it's a fee simple transfer where it's changed hands to where now the Nature Land Trust owns it. There's no conservation easement on it. They do conservation stuff, but who knows? It's not in the deed. There's nothing holding them to it except maybe the grant agreement. So in the event that there's no conservation easement on a property funded by the OCCB, the county administrator and there's no, a conservation easement has a monitoring entity in it. If you do a fee simple, who's that third party monitor on it? If it's fee simple, it has to be Oconee County. That's the only entity that can do it. In the event that there's no conservation easement on the property funded by the OCCB, the county administrator shall be responsible for ensuring that the owner of the property complies with the ordinance and for enforcing the provisions of the ordinance. The grant agreement shall specify that the county shall be able to access the property for monitoring and or enforcement purposes. It begs the question of, will we require funds to pay for that monitoring, which is what private conservation groups generally do of their donors. But we wanted to just make it clear that the county has the duty and the right to monitor the property to make sure that the conservation values are maintained.
I hear a motion to accept proposed revisions to the Oconee County Conservation Bank ordinance and refer this to council for the September 1st meeting.
Make a motion.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any other discussion? Thank you for what you're doing.
Absolutely.
All in favor?
Aye. Thank you, Andy.
Thank y'all.
Ms. Brock?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of this committee. You have a really lovely, colorful tab document in front of you. I know that you all can read, so I'm not going to read you the document. This is just a history and a timeline, as you all know. The finding location and construction for the Westminster Magistrate Court has been a priority of Oconee County for 8 years. We are very happy to say that we have a location. We have done feasibility studies on refurbing the buildings that were there, but because of the refurbishments that had taken place in the building prior to county ownership, that's just not going to be possible. The site does, as you all know, have adequate parking. It has Main Street facing frontage. It has an additional building out back should there need to be an expansion for the future. And all public utilities are in place. The building that is standing now, which as you all know is the church, it has been remodeled 3 times. But the church materials inside, the pews, possibly parts of the pulpit, there is a baptismal in there. I'd like council to consider us being able to donate those to local churches specific to the Westminster area. We did have some people come and find their own family photos inside of the church, which is really touching to us. We'd really like to be able to preserve what we can and allow other churches to utilize anything outside of the sticks and bricks of the building. And obviously, we would have a public notice for this. The document in front of you, and I realize we're pushing time here a little bit, it's just a timeline of the history of what we've done after the selection of going with Jay Davis on this trail. I'm sorry, we're working with Jay Davis on another building. I get confused sometimes. So this is for a design build. It has been an arduous and tedious process, both with the chief magistrate, Judge Derrick, and trying to pop them here from procurement. I want to give some kudos out because I have made them cut and trim and slice and sliver money off of the bottom line, because the $500,000 estimate presented to you in 2013 is a little outdated. If you'll look on the back page of your timeline before the tab figures begin, you'll see the recommendation from procurement from Jay Davis as design build. I'm gonna say Jay Davis until I just can't. And every time I say Jay Davis, she reaches over and says Trail. I apologize. We are yet working on another building at Shaw Rand with Jay Davis, so it's getting me confused because we've been working on both at the same time. I apologize. But our bottom dollar here is $844,287.40. I'd like for y'all to take time between now and the next council meeting to review the documents and drawings. We do have the exterior drawing here on the wall and the revised. I think this is the 10th revision here over on the right of the screen for the interior. I know this seems like an astronomical amount of money, but I'll be honest with you, it's not. A large part of what we're looking at here is the demolition of the existing building and the concrete and site work, which the county can take some responsibility for, as you know. We do have the ability to do that. We have shrunk down the original square footage by about 2,000 while still allowing us for expansion in the future. I'd like y'all to take into consideration that we would like to present this and a financial recommendation to you on September the 15th, which is the second meeting in September. I purposefully selected that date because I'm hoping that we'll have millage numbers in prior to that date, and it will give us a more accurate reflection of the 2020, 2021 adjustments, if there are any coming budgetary-wise. Any questions?
I think, number one, we had hoped to use the building, but obviously understood at the time of purchase that we may not be able to use that building. Number two, the site prep itself provided some of the least needs on some of the other places we looked at. That building was not under, does not take anything off taxable value because it was a church, so it was not taxed. It was actually owned by a nonprofit when we purchased it.
Correct, and had been
So
vacant for several years as well.
Purchase price actually helped the Shriners Group for that, which is what it was purchased from, and that's what it had been donated to. So the utilities alone, some of the other costs are astronomical, which was, and the site prep brought this, which is kind of why it's been knocked around for 8 years, was some of the reasons why I saw why the constant cost was well up above $1 million. $1.5 million is some of the things early on. So procurement, thank y'all. I know it's been a lot for doing this. I think the plans have been good. I think a lot of people have been involved in the plans. I think it's going to be a nice entryway into the city of Westminster, and take a building that would have probably, finally the steeple sooner or later was going to fall in because it rained inside through that steeple area. So
Yes, sir.
I'm appreciative of council on the site selection on this, and thank you for procurement administration for working on this. So we would need to a motion as stated to refer this to council for the September
15th, if
15th
that's appropriate.
meeting.
Make a motion.
We have a
Second.
motion, we have a second. Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Thank you all so much.
Need a motion to adjourn?